Welcome back to Angular Masterclass series. In the third part, we will learn about the routing and navigation in Angular.
Now we're coming back to the routing and navigation in Angular. This feature is originated from Angular 2, but slowly it got its advancement with each version. Routing and navigation, what exactly it means? See, routing is like when we go transfer our controls from one component to the another component. So in creating a single page application, or even though in multi-page application also, there is a need that we have to transfer from one component to another component. So from Angular 2 this routing was started, and slowly we have seen that routing has changed in each and every word. Going into depth of the Angular routing, when we started in the Angular routes, all the components we defined in our main component, that is app routing, or whatever the main component we are creating, and each component we give the path and what exactly this path will take to our component. So there is a two values, the path and the component, by which we create the routes for each components. So when we see from Angular 2 to Angular 6, it was like that only. So what we used to do, we create all the components, we take all the components in our routing module, and we give the path and the corresponding component to each for each route. But when we go into the depth, the problem is that if the application is large and we take all the components in a single module, in a single app module, then the loading time and the processing time becomes very large, and sometimes it can reduce the performance of the application. So with the Angular 8, a new concept was arises, that is lazy loading. But before going to the lazy loading, we must know what are the basic concepts in the Angular routing. So for Angular routing, there are different things. We can create a routing configuration, we create the outlets. So in routing configuration, what we used to do, we define the path, we define the where to this path will take you, like to the concerned component. So all the configuration is defined in the routing configuration, and this routing outlet, we have to define a component from the outlet will start, where the routing is going to start. So generally the main component, that is app component, by default we start our outlet from there. But if you want to define another component as a main, from there you have to give your outlet. So without outlet your routing will not start. So outlet is basically the point from which we are going to create the different routes. And when we have to pass from route to different pages, then we have to give the router link. In router link, we have to pass the path where you have to go. As we know, in the routing also we can pass the data through params and through passing to the query params and through the state management. So query params is like when we define a query param, so whatever the params we are passing in the route, that we can access, and that param we can use in a concerned component. So routing also is considered as a communication between one component to another component through method of query params, and there is one more method that is called state. So by which we can know from what is the history of the particular route. So what is the last component in which it was lying, and whatever the information we pass in that history, that will be accessed in the next component. So by this routing we can understand that we can transfer the information through the route, through the params and the state history. Now coming back to the lazy loading. Exactly the problem with the routing was there before Angular 8, like we used to call all the components together. That makes the application more complex, and it degrades the processing of the application. So now to reduce that problem, lazy loading concept was introduced. Lazy loading is basically a modular concept. So what we used to do, despite of the components, we define the modules, and inside each module we divide the whole application into different modules, and each module is considered over different components. Now that module we are going to call in our main routing, and in our main routing we define the children module for each path. So for example, if we defining any path, we have a concerned children module. So if we click on that path, if we load that path, that particular children module will only going to load. And inside that module, whatever the components and whatever the different routes are there, that will be accessible. So despite of calling all the components together, lazy loading has created a method by which we call the one module one by one, and this reduces the pressure on the application and enhances the performance of the application. So routing is the thing which from Angular 2 to Angular 16, it has given a huge path, and it has given a single page application method a different boost. So in this routing, there are the different concepts we have seen. Now coming back to after this, we are going to learn about the form.
So that concludes our part 3 of Angular Masterclass series. In the next episode, we will dive deeper into Angular forms. So stay tuned.